everyone, today I'm going to talk about my all-time favorite young adult books. I didn't really know what to film today, so I thought why not keep it simple and let's just talk about some of my favorite YA books of all time. I love to read YA and I definitely love to talk about my favorite books. Like, I can never shut up about the books that I really love. So yeah, that's basically what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about my favorite YA books from all different genres. There are standalones, there are books from a series. There are some very popular books on this list and also some hopefully lesser known that I might recommend to you. Also, I'm not going to do this list in any particular order because it would be way too hard to rank these books because I love them all so much. But yeah, let's just get started with this video and then I'm going to tell you all about my top 10 favorite young adult books. So I'm just going to start with my most recent favorite, and that is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is the first book in the Scythe series, which is a book series about a dystopian world. And in this world, basically everything has become perfect. There's no longer death, there's no disease, basically every life is as good as it can be. But there are also these Scythes, people who basically kill other people, because of course people still have to die to keep the population under control. So yeah, that's basically the premise of this book. And then at the beginning of the series you have two people named Scythe and Rowan who become Scythe apprentices. So yeah, that's where the story starts out. And yeah, let me just tell you, I love this book series so much. So I read Scythe about a month ago and I completely fell in love with this world and with this concept, like right from the start. What I love the most about this series is that the world building is so incredibly good. So you have this dystopian world, which is basically just Earth, but then this sort of perfect future where there's this sort of IA named the Thunderhead who controls everything and makes sure everything runs smooth. So in a lot of ways it feels very realistic, like a very realistic view of the future. And just the world is so well established and all the rules and how everything works, and it is done in a very like organic way. It's not that you have like a ton of exposition constantly, it just very much naturally shows you how this world works. And yeah, I think that's what I love most about this book, because it has such a original concept. Like, it's really something new from a YA series, because normally with dystopian YA series it's always like a world with a lot of problems, with a bad government and all that sort of stuff. But here it's actually the complete opposite. And like, it's so interesting to read about that, and it really made me think about death and like the meaning of life and how it would be like if like death was no longer a thing. Of course the characters are also like really amazing and completely badass. I loved Rowan, I loved Scythe, I loved like coming along on their journey. And yeah, I also read the sequel to this book, Thunderhead. I also really loved that book. Like, the sequel is also amazing and so incredibly good. And yeah, I don't know how many books there are going to be in this series in total, but I do know that at least there has to be one other book, because the story isn't over yet with Thunderhead. And I cannot wait for that next book. Like, I'm so incredibly excited. I will pre-order it, I will read it straight away. So yeah, the Scythe series is definitely one of the best YA series I've read in a really long time. I'm completely in love with these books. The hype around them is very much justified in my opinion. So if you haven't read Scythe yet, please do, because I think you will really love it, especially if you love a good YA series. Then the next book I want to talk about is Ink by Alice Broadway. I've talked about this book before, so you probably know that this is a favorite of mine. But yeah, Ink is a YA book that is about this world where everything you do and you achieve is tattooed on your skin, or like marked on your skin. So the work that you do, your age, the school things you have done, it's all tattooed on your skin, and people who don't have any markings are considered dangerous because you don't know what those people have done. And yeah, the main character of this book is a girl named Leonora, and at the beginning of the book her father has just died, and also Leonora has just graduated from school and she really wants to be a inker or like a marker of those tattoos. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about it. But in any case, yeah, as I said, I really love this book. I think it's quite underrated. I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, but I can really recommend it because it's such an amazing YA story. Again, this is a book with incredible world building, and it really took me by surprise. And again, it's something with a very original concept, with like the tattoos and the markings and how everything works. And I think they explain that really well, and like it sort of feels realistic because it's not that different from our world. It's not a really dystopian, it's more sort of fantasy, I guess, because it's not like set in our world, but it still very much resembles our world. So this book sort of feels like a contemporary almost. Like I wasn't expecting much of this because of course I hadn't heard a lot about it. I only bought it for like the beautiful, beautiful cover. Like the cover of this book is one of the best things ever. And yeah, I just really want more people to read Ink because it's really good, and I think a lot of people will really love it, but it just needs a little bit more hype and a little bit more love. And yeah, Ink, it's really good. I still have to read the sequel to Ink named Spark, but I'm going to do that very soon because I'm so curious to see what's going to happen next. And yeah, it's one of my favorites, and again, I cannot recommend this one enough. Then the next book I want to talk about is What I Lost by Alexandra Ballard. This is a YA contemporary book about a girl named Elizabeth who suffers from a eating disorder. And at the beginning of the book, she is being sent to a treatment center for that. But Elizabeth very much believes that she doesn't have a problem, so she's not very happy with that. And then the book basically follows her journey from like dealing with this eating disorder. So yeah, this is a contemporary, and I think it's actually the only contemporary on this YA list because I'm like not a big fan of YA contemporaries. I usually think they're cute and fun, but they're never like my all-time favorites. But What I Lost again was a book that really took me by surprise and that really drew me into the story. This book was so fascinating but so emotional. I cared so much for all of these girls. It's of course very heartbreaking with this serious topic of eating disorders. I think it was very well portrayed. Of course I don't know that because I've never suffered from an eating disorder, but to me it sounded very realistic. And yeah, as I said, I just really felt for all the characters. I loved them all so much. Basically, I read this book in a day because I could not stop reading and I was just obsessed by it. And I just loved What I Lost very much, and it's now definitely one of my all-time favorites. Then next on my list I have Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I will say though beforehand, I really love all of Leigh Bardugo's books, and I didn't really know which one to choose as like my favorite. So I just went with the first book in like the Grisha verse, which is the universe she writes about. But like I really love all of them, so like Leigh Bardugo is an amazing author. But anyway, Shadow and Bone is the first book in the Grisha trilogy. This is a fantasy world where some people are Grishas and they have sort of like magic powers. And then the main character is a girl named Alina who discovers that she has a very special power, and yeah, that is where the story starts off. So yeah, the Grisha trilogy is very much inspired by, I believe, Russian culture and like language. I really love the Grisha trilogy. Like a lot of people are big fans of the Six of Crows duology, but please don't forget the Grisha trilogy because I still like this one is also really good. I think the Grisha trilogy is a bit more typical YA, whilst the Six of Crows duology is a bit more original, because the Grisha books are of course about like a girl who discovers that she has this special power and she has to use it to like help everyone, save everyone, whatever. And yeah, what I just love about Leigh Bardugo's books in general is again the world building. I love that she has this big like shared universe and that all her series take place in that universe. It really works well for me, and I really love like the magic and the stories and everything. But what she also does really well is characters, and especially relationships between characters. I mean like romantic relationships, but also really friendships. I think she does that so well. And yeah, I just love Leigh Bardugo's writing so much. Like I think she writes so well, and I will read all the books she writes in the future. So yeah, maybe this is a little bit of cheating because this isn't really one book, it's more like an author and like this big book series, but in any case, I love all of those books. I love Shadow and Bone, I love them all. And again, if you haven't read like the original Grisha trilogy yet, please do, because they are really good as well. Then next up I have My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton and Jodie Meadows. I just cannot talk about this book without smiling instantly. Like, I love this book so much. My Lady Jane is a retelling of the story of Lady Jane Grey. The actual historical Lady Jane Grey wasn't a very happy story. Like, it was quite a tragic one that ends in beheading. But this retelling takes that story, completely turns it around, makes it really silly and really funny. And I love it so much. Like, it is one of the funniest books I've ever read. I actually reread this recently, so I've read it 2 times now, and like the second time I loved it even more than the first time. I think the strongest feature of this book is definitely that it's so funny, but it's such a like clever way of being funny. Especially if you enjoy history, I think you really love the way the authors like took this story and turned it around. But still, it's also so cute and like so sweet. All the characters are just so amazing and you really want the best for them. Yeah, I just love My Lady Jane so much. I will probably read it again in the future. Like, I love it so much. It's really one of my all-time favorites. It is technically the first book in a series about like Janes, but it reads as a standalone. Like, the books are not connected to each other. Like, of course they are sort of connected in like the style and everything, but the stories are very much separate, so you can read My Lady Jane as a standalone. And yeah, I just cannot express how much I love this book. It's so cute, it's so funny, it's amazing. Then the next book is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is the first book in the Ember in the Ashes series. It's a YA fantasy series that is very much inspired by ancient Rome. It's about this like sort of empire, and then the 2 main characters are Leigh, who is part of the resistance and goes undercover to like spy on like the leaders of the empire or like the elite school. And then the other main character is Elias, who is a mask, who is a soldier from that elite school. But he doesn't really like being a mask, and he doesn't like how certain people like are treated very badly, so he feels very much trapped in this position. And then Leigh and Elias, like, their paths cross, and I don't want to say more about it. Yeah, I think An Ember in the Ashes, the first book, is definitely my favorite still out of the series. I first read it about 3 years ago, I think, and I was so blown away by it and I loved it so much. This is a very epic book and a very epic book series. Like, it's so adventurous and dramatic, but like in a very good way. There is action in here, there's romance in it, there's a lot of like tragic stuff happening. It's definitely heartbreaking. Like, it's really that kind of series. And I just love the like ancient Roman style of this book, and I love all the characters, and I just love it so much again. I think An Ember in the Ashes is like the best one if you're really looking for an epic series between good and bad, and like soldiers and war and all that sort of stuff. And I just love this book series in general. Like, I really cannot wait for the final one because I really want to know how it's going to end. And yeah, this book series will basically crush you, but in a good way. Like, as it says in Harry Potter, you will suffer, but you will be happy about it. Then the next book is one that almost needs no introduction at this point, but that is of course Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. Like, who hasn't heard of this book yet? It was released earlier this year and it's a massively popular book. Children of Blood and Bone is a YA fantasy series. It takes place in this sort of African inspired world. The main character is a girl named Ziegli who tries to bring magic back. There's this evil king, and people who like used to have magic are very much being repressed. And then there's also a runaway princess and a crown prince that chases them down. And yeah, this book, I've talked about it before, but this book again is like so incredibly good. It's again very epic, and I love this fantasy world. Like, I loved how everything was inspired by like African myths and legends and gods. Of course, there's again a lot of action, but also a lot of like relationships, and there's of course again romance. This book is so well written that it's hard to believe that it's a debut novel. It's one of the best first books in a series that I've ever read. You just fall in love with this world and with the characters instantly. It is quite a big book, but don't let that intimidate you, because you really read it a lot more quicker than you would expect. And yeah, basically everyone seems to love this, and I completely understand why, because it's really good. I cannot say more about it. It's the first book. I cannot wait for the second book to be released, because the ending, like, oh, the ending of this book. But I believe we'll have to wait to March of 2019. So yeah, that's a little while longer. But Children of Blood and Bone, It's amazing, and if you haven't read it already, please do. And then the next book is very much a classic, and it is of course The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Again, you've probably heard of this book because I feel like it's very much a classic YA like book or series. And it is of course about Katniss Everdeen, who again lives in a dystopian world, but this dystopian world isn't all that pretty. Every year there are the Hunger Games where one boy and one girl from each district have to fight till the death, and there can only be one survivor or like winner. And yeah, I remember hearing the premise for the first time and I was like, that's so cool, like that's so epic. And I bought all 3 books at once. I finished them in like 4 days or so. And yeah, I love this series so much. I have loved it since I was 16 and I love it still. The first book, The Hunger Games, is definitely my favorite out of the 3. At the time, it was one of the first like really YA series I ever read, and I completely fell in love with like this sort of style of books. And it has been with me ever since. I've read it so many times. I still love it. I actually need to reread it soon again because like I just love this series so much and I will never get enough of it. And yeah, I cannot really say much about it apart from that because I feel like everyone has already read it by this point and everyone already knows it. But I feel like this series became popular for a reason, and that is because it's one of the first like YA series out there, and it's just really good, really addictive. Lots of amazing characters, of course very much heartbreaking with like a concept of Hunger Games where people have to fight to the death. And yeah, this will really be one of my all-time favorites, and I think I will just reread it forever and just love it forever. Then a next book that is really one of my all-time favorites is Cress by Marissa Meyer. This is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles series, which is a YA sci-fi series. And all of the 4 books are basically retellings of a fairy tale. So you have Cinder, which is Cinderella, Scarlet, which is Red Riding Hood, Cress, which is Rapunzel, and Winter, which is Snow White. So I've picked Cress because Cress is really my favorite in this series. By this point, like, we've already established the main story and we already know some of the characters, but then of course Cress herself is introduced in this one. I just love this story the most. It's so like cute and amazing and entertaining. And yeah, this series is just so much fun, and I love how each book has its own like story or its own character, but still it all like ends up together. This is one of the first book series I read when I discovered BookTube, and I was blown away by it. And it's again really typical YA, but also original and really its own thing. I feel this series has become a little bit older now, and I don't hear a lot of people like talk about it now. But I still love it very much, and all the characters are so cute, so well established. But yeah, I really should reread the Lunar Chronicles soon because it's such an amazing series, and I sometimes also forget about it, but I really shouldn't because it's just so good. And yeah, it's just an incredible story and fun and cute, as I said before. But yeah, Cress is my favorite, and yeah, that makes it one of my all-time favorites YA books. And then the last book I'm going to talk about today is one you've probably expected because of course it just had to be on this list. And that is of course Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. This is the 2nd book in the Dark Artifices series, and it's the latest installment in the like big Shadowhunter world book series. And of course this world is about Shadowhunters who fight demons, and there are also vampires, werewolves, and there's also a lot of adventure, and there's always like a bad guy. Lord of Shadows is definitely at the moment my favorite book out of all of the Shadowhunter books. I cannot really say much about the plot specifically again, because of course it's the 2nd book in a series that takes place after a whole other series. But I just love Shadowhunter books so much in general because again, it's so very much YA. It's like the definition of YA. And I will say though that the first like books in the Mortal Instruments series aren't the best. They're very much cliche and have a lot of tropes that I don't really like. But then by the point of Lord of Shadows, like, it has become so amazing because this world has gotten so big, and I love big fictional worlds like that. And yeah, I feel like the Shadowhunter books sometimes they feel a little bit like soap series because there's always something happening and there's always like drama and like exciting stuff. And yeah, I've just very much fallen in love with this world. I love all the drama. Like, it has a lot of YA tropes, but by this point I don't really mind it all that much. Also, the characters are so amazing because you can spend so much time with them. Like, they're all really complex and very much human, and they're definitely not perfect. And I just love that about like this entire world. And yeah, I just love Lord of Shadows a lot. And I'm so excited for the third book in the series to come out this December. Queen of Air and Darkness, I am so ready. I hope it will be amazing. And yeah, I just love Lord of Shadows so much. It's one of my all-time favorites again, and the last one on this list. So yeah, this is it for my all-time favorite young adult books. It's like a bit of a general video, just me talking about books that I love. And I think I want to do more like these sort of favorites videos in the future. I'm definitely going to do one about my favorite historical fiction books, because I think you might enjoy that. And maybe also one about fantasy series, I don't know. Just please let me know what you would like to see, if I will do more of these like sort of favorites videos. But yeah, this was it now for this video. And if you like this video, please go subscribe. Or maybe give it a thumbs up, because I would really appreciate that. And then hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!